Of the global curve, a conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
Vielleicht nur als Imposant.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Raisha Sehgal. On Gravitas tonight, we will tell you how Russian troops are crawling through gas pipelines to capture towns. All this while Ukraine is now desperate for a ceasefire deal. Also on the show, we ask, is Syria becoming another Libya? We say this because 1,000 people have been killed in clashes between security forces and Assad loyalists, with women at the epicenter of this massacre. Also on Gravitas, we will tell you how Nepal is seeing a churn for Hindu monarchy. And this comes 2 decades after the royal slaughter. All that and a lot more lined up on the show tonight. Our top story on Gravitas tonight is about the Russia-Ukraine war. Less than 24 hours before Ukrainian officials sit across American officials in Saudi Arabia to secure a ceasefire and a framework for a peace agreement in the 3-year-long war with Russia that has claimed more than 43,000 of its soldiers. What it looks like, Kiev's chances of playing any territorial card as a bargaining chip have majorly been reduced. Russian military is tightening its grip on Ukraine, executing a series of rapid advances. In the Kursk region, Russian troops have encircled thousands of Ukrainian forces and reclaimed 3 settlements. That's in Ukraine's Sumy region. Russia has recaptured Novonik, which is a small settlement across the border, along with the village of Lebedevka. While in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region, Russian forces have captured the village of Kostya-Ternopol. Well, Moscow's latest offensive combines aerial assault with intensified ground operations. Over the past week, drone and missile strikes have created chaos on Ukrainian cities. According to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, around 1,200 guided aerial bombs, nearly 870 attack drones, and more than 80 missiles of different types had been used by Russia against Ukraine. That's just in the last week. To give you an estimate, that is over 2,000 missiles, drones and bombs fired in just 7 days. But it's not just the aerial strikes that is gaining momentum and attention. An extraordinary and unconventional tactic used by Russian special forces in Kursk is also making headlines. While elite Russian troops navigated an abandoned gas pipeline to infiltrate Ukrainian defenses, traveling nearly 16 kilometers through a narrow 1.5 meter wide pipeline while enduring extreme conditions for days. The maneuver allowed Russia to emerge undetected behind Ukrainian lines, launching a surprise attack. According to reports, the Russian forces crept through the pipeline, avoiding detection until they were in prime position to strike Ukraine. Now, this strategy worked to devastating effects, catching Ukrainian soldiers off guard and also accelerating Russia's advance. Although the Kremlin has not officially commented on this, the commander of Chechenya's Akhmat Special Forces reshared images of soldiers inside the pipeline on Telegram, hailing the operation as a major achievement. Images circulating on Russian Telegram channels, it showed Russian commandos wearing gas masks illuminated by headlamps, navigating through the dark and narrow passage. The pipeline in question was built during the Soviet era. It used to transport gas from western Siberia through Sudza into Ukraine until the start of this year, when Kiev cut off all Russian gas transit through its territory. And according to open-source military maps, Ukrainian forces in Kursk are nearly encircled, a situation that former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev described in a post on Telegram as a smoking cauldron that is about to be sealed shut. Remember, last August, Ukraine seized around 1,300 square kilometers of Russia's Kursk region, aiming to gain an upper hand for future negotiations and also force Moscow to divert resources away from eastern Ukraine. However, with Russia now regaining control not just in Kursk but in other parts of Ukraine as well, Kiev's bargaining chip is rapidly losing its value, something that could not have come at a worse time for Kiev. We say that because Ukraine finds itself without US military aid and intelligence sharing. Washington has frozen arms shipments and intelligence sharing with Kiev, following a contentious meeting between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington 2 weeks ago. The suspension has left Ukraine in a tough spot, in a tough position, with its defensive capabilities severely affected, the loss of strategic territory and American support. All this places Kiev in an increasingly weak position ahead of the negotiations with the US. Ukrainian forces now face an uphill battle in a bid to retain what remains under their control, especially when they lack resources. At this point of time, Russia continues to reassert its control, and Ukraine finds itself on the defensive, struggling to maintain its foothold. Now, with the situation worsening rapidly for Ukraine, it seems that Kiev may not have any major bargaining chip in the talks in Saudi Arabia. Instead, it is now scrambling for a ceasefire. Ukrainian officials told AFP that a long US intel pause for Ukraine would rather give Russia major advantage, and that Kiev is likely to propose a sky and sea ceasefire at the Saudi talks with the US.
The most intensive work with President Trump's team at various levels has been ongoing all day. Many calls. The focus is clear. Peace as soon as possible, security as reliably as possible. Ukraine is committed to being as constructive as possible.
Our next story is about Syria. The question being, is Syria becoming another Libya? Here's why I say this. In 2 days, more than 1,000 people have been killed in clashes. Between Syrian security forces and forces loyal to the ousted President Bashar al-Assad. There's death, there's arson, vandalism on the streets. It is the deadliest violence that has broken out in the country since the Syrian war began 14 years ago. On Monday, Syria's new officials announced the end of the operation against loyalists of deposed President Bashar al-Assad. But this came after over 1,000 civilians were killed in the worst violence since his overthrow in the violence that broke out last week. Survivors describe random shootings, burning homes, and families fleeing in terror. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, allied paramilitary groups aligned with the new administration in Syria have carried out retaliatory killings. The fighting flared up on Thursday last week, that's on March 6th, when pro-Assad militias attacked government forces in the coastal area of Jableh. The area is dominated by Alawites. The militias targeted security patrols and checkpoints, killing 13 personnel. The former president, Bashar al-Assad, belongs to the Alawite community, a Shia sect of Islam. Now, the Alawites are a minority group and they had dominated government posts under Assad. They are still loyal to him. Meanwhile, the group that has come to power after his fall, we're talking about Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, is an Al-Qaeda offshoot. Alawites and other Syrian minorities such as Christians and the Druze fear that they will face persecution under this hardline Sunni regime. Although interim President Ahmad al-Shara has pledged to carry everyone along, now in the government crackdown that followed the attack on security on Thursday, scores of civilians were killed. The government forces were joined by armed Sunni fighters who are reported to have targeted and killed Alawite people in what has been described as revenge for atrocities. That's under the Assad regime. On Saturday, armed groups loyal to Assad attacked several medical facilities, including Latakia's National Hospital.
The attack came from buildings surrounding the hospital. Some of these structures were isolated, including an unfinished and abandoned building. It appears that the attackers infiltrated these empty buildings and opened fire on the hospital.
As a result, many civilians were caught in the crossfire. Bodies were seen lying on the roads and on the roofs of buildings, as gunmen had prevented civilians from burying them for a very long time. As security forces regained control, many locals voiced dread over the resurgence of violence. Driven by revenge, the violence marks the biggest challenge yet for Syria's new government, now in the absence of any legal accountability. There's fear that this could fuel further violence in Syria and destabilize post-Assad Syria. Syrian security reinforcements have been deployed across the port cities of Latakia and Jableh, with roads shut down as forces work to regain control of the coastal region.
We don't want a sectarian war. We want to rebuild our country. We don't want bloodshed, neither from us nor them, because it won't change anything. There are those who benefit from war and don't want Syria to recover. They profit while civilians on both sides suffer. But we reject that. We want peace and we want our country to heal.
Well, Syria's neighboring countries have vowed to support Syria, announcing the establishment of a joint operations center in a bid to combat the Islamic State militant group. Well, foreign ministers, defense ministers, chiefs of staff and intelligence chiefs from Jordan, Turkey, Syria, Iraq and Lebanon attended this meeting.
As a neighboring country to Syria, we feel directly the impact of the situation in Syria. We have the capability to support the Syrian people and the interim government in national reconstruction, maintaining Syria's security and stability, and ensuring the freedom and dignity that the Syrian people deserve.
Well, Syria's leader Ahmed al-Shara has launched probe into the deadly clashes and has declared that Syria will not be dragged into another civil war.
We will not tolerate the remnants of the fallen regime who committed crimes against our army forces and state institutions. They have only one choice, which is to surrender themselves to the law immediately.
But as Shara scrambles to contain the deadliest violence Syria has seen in years, the scenes from the ground have reopened wounds of the civil war. You see, tensions have been high ever since Assad's downfall. There were sectarian attacks against Alawites. This despite promises from Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara that the country's new leaders will carve out a political future for Syria that includes and represents all its communities. But in the latest clashes, most of the dead are allegedly members of the Alawite community, the core constituency of Assad's government, and the question being, can Damascus restore calm after the clashes? It's hard to say right now. It has struggled to reconcile with skeptics of its Islamist government, as well as with Kurdish-led authorities and the Druze minority. Al-Shara has lobbied to convince the US and Europe to lift sanctions so that it can pave the way for economic recovery and pull millions of Syrians out of poverty. But the West is concerned that lifting sanctions before Syria transitions into an inclusive system could lead to another chapter of autocratic rule. Assad's overthrow had ended decades of dynastic rule by his family, which was marked by severe repression and a devastating civil war. Well, we are talking about the war in which Western countries, Arab states and Turkey backed the rebels. Meanwhile, Russia and Iran backed Assad. It further became a theater for proxy conflicts among the armed factions with different loyalties and agendas. It has killed hundreds of thousands of people and displaced millions of Syrians. After Assad's overthrow, Syrians seemed to have secured the freedom to chart their own future. But even though all seemed good for a while, the deadly clashes have thrown wrench into the works. What comes next? That is anybody's guess. Let's now shift our focus to Nepal, where nearly 2 decades after the royal family was gunned down in a massacre, calls to restore the monarchy are growing louder in Nepal. Thousands have rallied in Kathmandu, demanding the return of the king and restoration of Hinduism as Nepal's state religion. The public's frustration with political instability and rampant corruption has fueled the calls for monarchy. Well, here's what is happening in Nepal. On around 10,000 of supporters of Gyanendra Shah blocked the main entrance to Kathmandu's Tribhuvan International Airport as he arrived from a tour of Western Nepal. He arrived to chants of "We want the monarchy, come back king, save the country, long live our beloved king." The other passengers were forced to walk to and from the airport. Hundreds of riot police blocked the demonstrators from entering the airport, but there was no violence at all. You see, Gyanendra was forced to give up his rule in 2006 following massive street demonstrations. 2 years later, in 2008, the monarchy was officially abolished. Gyanendra left the royal palace to live as a commoner. Now, Nepalis have grown disillusioned with the republic. They have cited political instability, a struggling economy, and widespread corruption as the reason for their displeasure. Since the monarchy's abolition, Nepal has seen 13 different governments. This has fueled a sort of nostalgia for the monarchy despite growing support for the former king. Gyanendra has not commented on the calls for the return of monarchy in Nepal. He became the king in 2002, that's after his brother and family were massacred in the palace. 2 decades ago, on a summer's night in Nepal in 2001, Crown Prince Dipendra Bir Bikram Shah ambushed a royal family gathering, opening fire and killing 9 people, including his father, the king. Then he turned the gun on himself and shot himself. In a single night, Nepal's royal family was almost entirely wiped out. The killer lay in a hospital bed in a coma, having been proclaimed king the moment his father died. The massacre reportedly followed an argument between Dipendra and his parents, who objected to his plans to marry local aristocrat Devyani Rana. It is believed that Dipendra was threatened with being disinherited if he continued with the match. And this may have been what drove him to murder on June 1st, 2001. Well, that's one part of the story. Others say that the king's decision to move towards a constitutional monarchy after an uprising in the 1990s had angered his son, who felt that he was giving too much power away and worried him about inheriting a less role. While we may never know what really drove him to this, Dipendra was not a ruler for long. Hours after the massacre, he was declared brain dead. And then his uncle, Gyanendra, had become Nepal's 3rd king in 3 days. The royal massacre had shocked the tiny Himalayan nation. The grieving public took to the streets and riots followed for several days. What followed was a turbulent period in Nepal that culminated in the end of the country's monarchy. 7 years after the massacre, 2 decades later, there's fresh calls for the monarchy to be reinstated. The demonstrators who won the king back said that they were hoping for a change in the political system to stop the country from further worsening. They say, "We are here to give the king our full support," they said. Whatever drove the public to oust Gyanendra so many years ago is clearly no longer a problem in Nepal. Nepalis won the monarchy back, and despite growing support for the former king, Gyanendra is yet to make any comment. The question right now being, will monarchy be brought back in Nepal? Better yet, even if the king is reinstated, will he be able to fix the economy and weed out corruption? All right, moving on to our next story. Germany's planned acquisition of 35 American F-35 fighter jets, it has come under scrutiny following concerns that the US under President Donald Trump could disable the aircraft remotely. The fears have increased as Washington is moving closer to Moscow and has, in a way, alienated Europe as it presses Ukraine to sign a minerals deal. Our next report telling you more.
Imagine a scenario where Europe's skies are patrolled by advanced fighter jets, sleek, powerful, and ready to defend the continent's sovereignty. Yet, with a single command from Pentagon, these very aircraft could be rendered inoperative, grounded not by enemy action, but by the decisions of an ally. This unsettling possibility stems from Europe's heavy reliance on American-made military hardware, particularly the F-35 and F-16 fighter jets. Recent discussions have raised concerns about the existence of a so-called kill switch, a mechanism that could allow the US to remotely disable or limit the operational capabilities of these aircraft. While the US government and defense contractors have not publicly confirmed such a feature, the mere prospect has significant implications for European nations. Last week, US President Donald Trump froze military aid to Ukraine and paused intelligence sharing to put pressure on Volodymyr Zelensky to convene peace talks with Russia and to sign a minerals deal with Washington. US-supplied F-16s have now stopped working in Ukraine. Interestingly, the US has not directly supplied any F-16 to Ukraine. Denmark and Netherlands have supplied Kyiv these American-made fighter jets. Around 65 F-16s have been pledged by NATO countries since US President Joe Biden first authorized willing European allies to send them to Ukraine in August 2023. Now, in light of these developments, Berlin is worried. Germany is buying 35 F-35 fighter jets from the US. The deal is currently on order under a $6.9 billion deal. Germany is acquiring these jets specifically due to their advanced nuclear delivery capabilities. The concerns are not only of Germany, but are now at the center of a broader debate about European reliance on US military hardware. European NATO countries have more than doubled their arms imports over 5 years, with 60% sourced from the US. The findings by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute coincide with an announcement by European Union states that they intend to strengthen the continent's defense capabilities in response to a US foreign policy shift under President Trump. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Shifting our focus to India now, after Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu called for incentives for families to have more children, one of his party MPs has announced that families with a third child in his constituency will receive a fixed deposit of Rs 50,000 for a girl child or a cow and a calf for a boy. TDP MP from Vizianagaram, Kiapalla Naidu, has said that he will give the cash incentive from his salary as a lawmaker. The TDP MP's offer comes after the Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister and party president called for people to have more children. Well, Appal Naidu's offer went viral on social media, with TDP leaders and activists reposting and resharing the announcement on their social media accounts.
Today I've decided, after discussing with my mom and wife, that any woman who gives birth to a girl as the third child, we will immediately deposit 50,000 rupees into the mother's account. At the same time, if the third child is a boy, we will give a cow. The reason is that how we respect women and Gau Mata. Similarly, the child will be protected by the cow.
Chief Minister Naidu has praised the MP for announcing the offer. The Chief Minister had earlier voiced his concern over the declining population in South India, saying that its aging population poses challenges, whereas states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar have a younger population. He emphasized the need for long-term demographic management rather than population control. Chandrababu Naidu over the weekend had announced that maternity leave will be granted for all women employees during pregnancy, irrespective of the number of children they have. We now shift our attention to Israel. A cyber attack linked to Iran has exposed highly sensitive information about thousands of Israelis, raising security concerns as Iranian officials scramble to contain the fallout. Well, despite ongoing investigations and probes, officials still struggle to assess how this classified information ended up in the hands of the hackers. Well, according to a report by Israeli newspaper Haaretz, in early February, an Iranian-backed cyber group leaked tens of thousands of documents, claiming that the documents were from Israel's police force and the National Security Ministry. According to reports, the leaked files reveal details about private gun owners, personal details of armed Israeli security personnel, and locations where weapons and ammunition are stored inside public firms in Israel. Also, information related to firearms and munitions. These records come as recent as January 2025. It also contains names, pictures, military backgrounds, and medical histories of individuals licensed to carry weapons. Among the leaked documents are copies of Israeli police-issued ID cards for officers authorized to carry guns, training records for private security personnel, even maps and blueprints of armories used by security guards have been published. The breach reportedly hands over a detailed blueprint of Israel's private and public security infrastructure to Iran. And there is much more to this. Israel's police and national security ministry reportedly said that there is no evidence of a direct hack into their internal systems. Instead, they suggest that the breach came from a private company. However, they have offered no answers about the larger security risks posed by the exposure of all these personal information. Now, this incident is a part of a broader cyber war against Israel. Now, since the war in Gaza began, cyber attacks targeting Israeli firms have skyrocketed. According to a 2024 report from Israel's National Cyber Directorate, there has been a dramatic rise in hacking attempts, data leaks, and cyber influence campaigns, all this against Israel. Just last year, over 900 cyber attack-related posts targeting Israel appeared on platforms like Telegram, and more than 500 stolen Israeli data files were published on the darknet. Israeli officials warn that these leaks are a part of a coordinated effort to undermine public trust and further weaken Israel's security. Meanwhile, Iran is ramping up its defense. Iran, Russia, and China are strengthening their military ties through joint exercises, which has begun off the coast of Iran. The drills aim to strengthen security, multilateral cooperation, and counter what they call the American hegemony, codenamed Security Belt 2025. The fifth joint naval exercise was held near the Iranian port of Chabahar in the Gulf of Oman, and it included observers from South Africa, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Iraq, UAE, and Sri Lanka. The exercises include simulated attacks on maritime targets, joint search and rescue operations, spot checks, and arrests. The question now is, how will Israel respond to the leak? And what more damage can the classified files that have not been made public do? Well, as American and South Korean forces commence their massive war games, Pyongyang responds with a show of force that threatens to escalate tensions. South Korea's military says that North Korea has now fired multiple ballistic missiles. Pyongyang has long viewed the drills as a provocation. South Korea, on its part, has strengthened its surveillance and is closely coordinating with the US following North Korea's latest missile launches. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff says that North Korean missiles were launched from North Korea's Hwanghae province. Now, these multiple missiles were launched just hours after annual joint military exercises kicked off. Now, the launch marks North Korea's fifth missile launch event this year. Last week, Kim Yoo-jong, the powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, warned against further provocations in response to the US deploying an aircraft carrier in South Korea. We're talking about USS Carl Vinson and its strike group arrived in South Korea. This is the latest deployment of a US strategic asset aimed at displaying the firmness of US-South Korea ties. The ongoing South Korea-US military exercise known as Freedom Shield is set to last for 11 days. South Korea has strengthened its surveillance and is also closely coordinating with the Pentagon. North Korea's foreign ministry warns that the Freedom Shield drills could spark, and I'm quoting here, physical conflict on the Korean peninsula and calling them an aggressive and confrontational war rehearsal. The US stations tens of thousands of its soldiers in South Korea, and the allies regularly stage joint drills, which they describe as defensive in nature. But such exercises between South Korea and the US, it has always angered Pyongyang, which regards them as rehearsals for invasion, and North Korea then responds with weapon tests of its own. Well, ties between Pyongyang and Seoul have been at one of the lowest points in years, with the North launching a flurry of ballistic missiles last year. Now, the joint US-South Korea drills will involve live, virtual and field-based training. According to a statement from Washington, D.C., the exercises between South Korea and the US will run until March 20th. The exercises come after 2 South Korean Air Force fighter jets dropped 8 bombs on a village during a joint training exercise with US forces on March 6th last week. And well, in that incident, about 31 people, including civilians and military personnel, were wounded. Just last week, North Korea unveiled for the first time a nuclear-powered submarine which is under construction. Experts say that the submarine can pose a major security threat to South Korea and the US as well. North Korea obtaining a greater ability to fire missiles from underwater is a worrying development because it's difficult for its rivals to detect such launches in advance. Questions about how North Korea, a heavily sanctioned and impoverished country, could get resources and technology to build nuclear-powered submarines have surfaced. Donald Trump and Elvis Presley, 2 men from different walks of life, both successful in their respective domains and famous in their own right. But ever wondered, what connects the US president to the music star? While you scramble for answers, here's what happened. Trump has compared himself to Presley yet again. You must be thinking, has he done this again? Well, yes, he has. Recently, in a post on Truth Social, Trump posted an image that showed half of his face and half of Presley's, thus comparing himself with the singer. The image shows Presley on the left and Trump on the right. It has no caption accompanied the image update. The picture very well speaks for itself. But what remains to be uncovered still is Trump's uncanny obsession with the rock and roll artist. It wasn't long ago netizens caught on the cue that Trump, in fact, had promoted Presley multiple times in the past. Last year, alongside an image posted on social media, Trump had said, for so many years, people have been saying that Elvis and I look alike. Now, this picture has been going all over the place. What do you think? Now, what this did was spark conversations around the topic. If these 2 public figures, in fact, shared similarities that could make for great fodder for public support and gossip. Also take, for example, Trump's infamous mugshot, which he earned in 2023 after being booked at a country jail in Atlanta in a racketeering case. Trump claimed that was his best one ever taken, which also, by the way, now adorns the hallway of the White House. Not just that, Trump compared this shot to that of Elvis Presley's and Frank Sinatra's when they were in police custody. He also argued that his mugshot was the best-selling mugshot ever, which defeats the ones of the two famous singers. And mind you, it is not just Elvis or Sinatra who Trump compared himself to, but also noteworthy personalities such as Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and even Jesus Christ, thus exerting his position next to these giants. While words of affirmation are a good thing, Trump clearly takes it a few notches up. And the real icing on the cake being when Trump compared himself to a king just last month. He wrote, and I quote here, "Congestion pricing is dead in Manhattan and all of New York is saved." He wrote, "Long live the king," unquote. And if this was not self-proclaiming enough, the White House re-upped it on X and Instagram with an illustration to Trump wearing a crown on a magazine cover that resembled Time magazine. You see, while America continues to debate who the real king is, Trump or Presley, Trump's recent post with the repurposed image was not without a purpose. After all, as the latest Elvis comparison comes as, Trump has reportedly been feeling snubbed by the United Kingdom. Tesla demonstrations are heating up across the United States and beyond, with demonstrators calling for accountability from the world's richest man. Now Elon Musk is firing back, claiming that these demonstrations are not organic, but they are now funded by prominent Democratic donors. Musk accused billionaire philanthropist George Soros, LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, and others of backing 5 activist groups leading these demonstrations. He alleges that they are using Act Blue, which is a major Democratic fundraising platform, to funnel money into anti-Tesla efforts. From New York to London, these demonstrations are gaining traction and momentum worldwide. Organizers, including groups like Troublemakers and the Disruption Project, are coordinating efforts through online platforms like Tesla Takedown. Musk's claims also tie into a broader probe into Act Blue, with allegations of foreign and illegal donations surfacing. The fundraising platform has since updated its policies, but concerns remain. For now, the battle between Musk and his critics rages both on the streets and online.
Canada, 131,674 votes, resulting in
Shifting our focus to Canada now, which has elected a new Prime Minister-elect Mark Carney, who is all set to replace Justin Trudeau as Canada's Prime Minister. Now, the tensions between Canada and the US are not unknown per se, thanks to an escalating trade war owing to US President Donald Trump's tariff threats. And add to that, Trump's claims of making Canada the 51st state of the United States of America, which he has been harping on for quite some time. And now, an interesting trivia has come to light, that of Carney comparing Trump to Lord Voldemort, the antagonist in the much-famed Harry Potter series. Let's start with the latest. Over the weekend, Carney was elected as Trudeau's successor in the Liberal Party after party members voted in a nominating competition between 4 contestants. Now, in his acceptance speech, Carney addressed US President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada and the threat Trump has posed towards the country, calling the current events the greatest crisis of our lifetime.
There's someone who's trying to do the opposite. There's someone who's trying to weaken our economy. Donald Trump. Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living. He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed. And we won't. We won't.
He also said that Canada faced dark, dark days brought on by a country we can no longer trust. Carney has pledged to follow a tit-for-tat approach, and that's on U.S. imports. As past records suggest, Carney has been a vocal Trump critic. But what stood out is Carney comparing Trump to Lord Voldemort, popularly known as the Dark Wizard, who also happens to be Harry Potter's arch-enemy. Commenting on Trump's Canada annexation plan, Carney said, and I quote here, "I view this as the sort of Voldemort of comment," unquote. Especially keeping in mind what is at stake for Canada in the face of Trump's threats. It turns out the Harvard graduate and former banker has taken inspiration from Hogwarts to brand Trump as the ultimate villain. But as they say, truth is stranger than fiction. And in this case, quite literally, so to say. However, the main challenge for Carney now is the high-stakes 2025 elections set to take place in October, where he is pitted against Pierre Poilievre, one that can make or break his prime ministerial ambition, as well as assess Canada's future. Our next story is from Israel. Its military is creating ChatGPT-like AI tool to target Palestinians. Yes, you heard that right. That's what Israel is doing at this point of time. Israel has compiled an extensive collection of intercepted Palestinian communications to make an artificial intelligence tool similar to ChatGPT, which it aims to use to enhance its espionage capabilities. According to investigative journalism done by The Guardian, along with Israeli-Palestinian publication Plus 972 magazine and the Hebrew outlet Local Call, the Israeli Army's Unit 8200 has programmed the AI tool to understand Arabic by using large amount of Palestinian phone calls and text messages obtained through its surveillance. Unit 8200 began building the model to create a sophisticated chatbot-like tool capable of answering questions about people it is monitoring and providing insights into the massive volumes of surveillance data it collects. Now, this development of this system started right after the start of Israel's war on Gaza in 2023. And here's the kicker. The data was gathered without consent, raising ethical concerns. Now, experts have warned that the tool could unfairly target civilians and enable social control. Already, the Israeli elite cyber unit has a track record of making advanced surveillance technology. It is not clear whether Israel has deployed the AI tool yet or not. Former official, we're talking about Roger Joseph, told an audience at a military AI conference in Tel Aviv last year that the model required psychotic amount of data. He said that they tried to create the largest data set possible, collect all the data the state of Israel has ever had in Arabic. To be clear, it's not just about preventing attacks. With this AI tool, Israel can track human rights activists, monitor Palestinian construction. What's really concerning is also that this AI tool, Israel will know what every person in Gaza or West Bank is doing. The Israeli unit also reportedly tried to train the AI model to understand specific military terminology of armed militant groups. But the massive collection of training data seems to have included large volumes of communications that have little or no intelligence value, but is also solely about everyday lives of Palestinians. But Israel's Unit 8200 is rather not alone among spy agencies experimenting with AI technology. In the US, even the CIA has rolled out a ChatGPT-like tool to move through open source information. The UK spy agencies are also making their own models, which it is also said to be training with open source data sets. Human rights activists are raising the red flag now. According to them, using surveillance material to train an AI model is invasive and incompatible with human rights. Well, we are talking about highly personal data taken from people who are not suspected of a crime and then being used to train a tool that could then help establish suspicion. What's more, several current and former Israeli intelligence officers who are known with smaller scale machine learning models used by Unit 8200 said that AI made the blanket surveillance of Palestinians more effective as a form of control, especially in the West Bank, where they said it has contributed to a greater number of arrests. The United States is rolling out a new artificial intelligence-driven crackdown on foreign nationals who show support for Palestine armed group Hamas or any other designated terror organization. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced the Catch and Revoke initiative, which aims to use AI to track and revoke visas of individuals deemed as a security threat. Well, this program reportedly involves scanning tens of thousands of student visas holders' social media accounts. American officials are looking for signs of pro-Hamas sentiments, particularly in posts made after the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. The AI system will flag individuals and officials will also assess if their visas should be revoked or not. Beyond social media, the U.S. government will review internal data sets to find foreign nationals who were previously arrested but remained in the country. Additionally, officials will analyze news reports of anti-Israel demonstrations and lawsuits filed by Jewish students to identify cases where foreign nationals allegedly engaged in anti-Semitic activities without facing repercussions. The initiative is a coordinated effort between the U.S. State Department, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Homeland Security. Well, under America's Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, the U.S. Secretary of State has broad authority to revoke visas if a foreign national is considered a potential threat. A single social media post expressing approval of the Hamas attack or even sympathy for the group could now be enough to trigger visa cancellation. The move reportedly aligns with the Trump administration's strong pro-Israel policies. Well, it seems NASA astronaut Sunitha Williams has been stuck in space forever, when in fact, she only completed 9 months at the International Space Station. Well, and as speculations are rife as to when Williams and her fellow astronaut Butch Wilmore will return back to Earth again, Williams has revealed the hardest part of being stranded in space, and it's quite unlike what you think. It's not the constant floating around due to lack of gravity, nor is it the confined quarters that could very well make one feel suffocated or boxed in. For Williams, whose 8-day mission extended to over 270-day stay in space, the uncertainty of events has been the hardest to deal with. With a great deal of precarity looming in when she would be able to meet her family again and also help her lead a normal life, not up in the air for a change. But in her home, addressing the press, she also acknowledged that how it must be a roller coaster of emotions for the members of her family, who must be waiting eagerly for the astronauts to return. This comes even as NASA has recently confirmed that astronauts Sunitha Williams and Butch Wilmore are set to return to Earth on March 16th. The duo had first embarked on this journey on June 5th last year, and they have been stranded on the International Space Station for 9 months straight. After the spacecraft suffered multiple technical issues which made it all too risky for them to come back. You can imagine what that can feel like, isolated, away from loved ones. And in times like these, it's only human for the uncertainty of things to get to one. And as per reports, next week, the duo will depart through a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. If all goes well, the NASA scientists will be able to reunite with their loved ones soon. At this point, one can only sincerely hope for the safe ride back home. Well, that's all that we have on the show tonight. Thanks very much for staying with us and watching WION The World.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world.